Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the latest Star Wars spin-off film called The Mandalorian and Grogu. This is not a season 4 continuation of the Mandalorian show, but it is a continuation of the overall Mandalorian story, which is told in feature-length film form, simply titled Mandalorian and Grogu. Disney did not decide to go through with the season 4 of the show. They decided to go more so with the feature-length film this time around. So if you've been, having any kind of desire to see Mandalorian or the Grogu characters again within the Star Wars universe, this film is kind of your opportunity to kind of see what they've been up to ever since we last saw them in season 3. Um, this is also our first feature-length Star Wars film in about 7 years, ever since The Rise of Skywalker. And so Disney has kind of allowed some air to breathe for those who really did not care for that movie or really did not care for that sequel trilogy that they did all those years back. And so they kind of took a break themselves as to what to kind of do with Star Wars. They know they have Star Wars Starfighter coming out next year. And so here we are with Mando and Grogu. And this is a continuation of the story, but it's not a season 4 of the show. It is just a feature-length story featuring these two characters. But in this film, though, we do follow Mandalorian on a mission where he's assigned to track down a member of the Hutt family from Jabba the Hutt, from those who remember him from Return of the Jedi. Basically, one of his relatives, or two of his relatives, I should say, asked the Mandalorian, to track down their basically Jabba's nephew. He's basically trying to become a ring fighter, and they both Mandalorian and Grogu go on this mission to track him down, bring him back to the family, make sure that he is, making wise choices. They kind of want him to get out of this fighter lifestyle. And so while they're there, they find out things about this new Hutt member that we were introduced to, where he wants to just continue fighting. He doesn't want to be associated with Jabba the Hutt. And so over the course of this film, they have to figure out, what can they do to kind of convince him to kind of go back to his family? What are some real, what are the real villains behind the scenes here of why the Hutt family is viewed so terribly? What are the Hutt family members that are kind of outside of that image, that are not kind of the gangster image that we knew him from Return of the Jedi? And, who exactly can Mandalorian trust? Who can Grogu trust? What are some times where Grogu has to kind of step in, help the Mandalorian out, and what are some times where the Mandalorian has to help Grogu out, now that the Grogu knows kind of more how to use the Force now and all this other stuff through the help of Luke Skywalker from the show. And so we're basically sent on another mission with Mandalorian and Grogu in feature-length form, and we also kind of get to learn about, the good side and the bad side of the Hutt family, and who kind of the real villains of this rescuing of this nephew are. But overall, guys, I enjoyed The Mandalorian and Grogu quite a bit. It's not, a new favorite Star Wars film in mine. It's not going to fix the wrongs of the things that Star Wars has been doing over the past couple years. I do think some of the Disney Plus content is a little too much as of late. We've just had so many different live action and animated shows that have come out over the years. It's just kind of hard to keep up with all of them. I've enjoyed some of them. Like, I enjoyed that Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I enjoyed, the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian. I've enjoyed Skeleton Crew. So they've done some stuff that I have really enjoyed, but there's just so much stuff to catch up on, and so much stuff that clearly isn't meant to be canon with the Star Wars universe, that it just kind of gets hard to keep up with a lot of it after a while. But I think as far as just Disney putting out something safe, putting out something that will not anger the fans further or anything like that, I think The Mandalorian and Grogu, for the most part, succeeds in doing that. But I do want to go over some positives and negatives as to why I enjoyed the film overall, but some things about it that I think could have been better, could have got more of the Star Wars fan base back on board with further Star Wars projects, hopefully, if we get, some more good ones here in the near future. So let's kind of go over some positives and negatives as to why I feel that way. So for the positives, for the most part, I did have more fun than I thought I would at this film for my first positive, and that's kind of always a really good thing to have whenever you loop, when you exit any film, is that you had a better time than you thought you were going to have. We live in a world now where, it has to be either the best film you've ever seen or the worst film you've ever seen. And there's we kind of live in a world where there's really no in between right now, it seems like. But for the most part, for being a Mandalorian film instead of a new season of television, I thought I was pretty happy with it for the most part. It did kind of feel like if they took kind of what they had for a season 4 and kind of made the best of that and told that in movie form, that is kind of what this feels like. It almost kind of feels like they went over maybe the episodes that they really didn't need and found a way to kind of tell it in feature length form, so it kind of gets rid of all the unnecessary stuff that we don't really need to dive into with these characters. So like I said, for the most part, I had a lot of fun watching it. It felt more fun than it really needed to be. And I think anybody that still kind of views Star Wars as a bad thing, though I don't think this is going to correct the wrongs of all the stuff Star Wars has done over the past couple years, I think this is kind of the first safe, fun enough project we have gotten about Mandalorian and about Star Wars in general. So that's always kind of a good thing in my book. The character of Grogu is very adorable here. Gets a ton of really fun, adorable, cute scenes in this. Anytime he walks around, anytime he's helping the Mandalorian out, getting into places that maybe the Mandalorian can't get into. Just tons of stuff with this character that's just absolutely fun and adorable to watch. So if you're a big Grogu fan, Baby Yoda, for those who don't know who I'm talking about, I think you're really going to have a lot of fun with this character. Just really, really adorable to watch on screen. There's also some really fun voice cameos in the film. Steve Blum from Toonami has a voice role in this, so it's really cool to see him pop up in something. He did the voice of Tom the host from Toonami, for those who watched Cartoon Network back in the day. I was a huge fan of the Toonami run when they were on Cartoon Network. Martin Scorsese has a fun creature character that he voices in this movie. Really fun to listen to. Even kind of has the same eyebrows that he has in real life. So cool to see him show up in this. And there's some other characters that show up in here that are pretty fun to witness as you're watching the film. I also thought Mandalorian had a lot of cool scenes himself, how he really is kind of still the most intimidating guy in the room whenever he shows up to talk to a mob boss, talk to an alien, talk to somebody that has a lot of power within the Star Wars galaxies. So it's just kind of cool to see the Mandalorian character show up and do some cool stuff and make sure that he is still kind of the toughest guy in the room in some of these scenarios. And then that goes into my next positive. I thought some of the creature effects and some of the overall special effects that were used here were very effective. You can definitely tell they probably put more money into this than if they were to do another season of television. So in that regards, I can kind of see why maybe they did want to do a feature-length film instead of another season of television. So I thought some of those creature effects and overall special effects were pretty impressive here for the most part. I also thought the use of the Hutts was also pretty effective here. I thought it was kind of cool that, because I think the Mandalorian stories, both the show and this movie, I think they're after Return of the Jedi, but before The Force Awakens. So I think it is kind of cool that we're focusing on some characters that do have connections to characters we saw in Return of the Jedi. So I thought that was pretty cool. I thought the use of the Hutts, like I said, were very effective, whether it's members of the Hutt family that don't want to be associated with Jabba, whether it is members of the Hutt's family that do want to continue the dirty work of Jabba the Hutt. So I thought all that was very effective. So the overall use of the Hutts, more fun than I thought it was going to be. And I also thought some of the overall humor was pretty effective here. They did get Jon Favreau, the showrunner of Mandalorian, to direct this film, who's also directed several episodes of the show at this point. I always love Jon Favreau. I love him as a filmmaker. I love him as an actor, and I love him as a writer as well. And I hear he's a very good cook in real life. So, but anyway, I thought the sense of humor that he brought to this, I thought was pretty effective here. Whether it's something like Grogu having to follow directions from the Mandalorian's voice, and he still can't get the directions right, and the mob boss that they're kidnapping is even commenting on the situation and stuff like that. There's a lot of humor they throw in here in the movie that I thought was pretty effective, whether it is the scenario I just talked about or not. So humorize, very effective for this film. Another thing Jon Favreau brought to the movie that I thought was very effective is he had these perspective cameras, so if we're following a small droid going through a really busy hallway with Mandalorian shooting, guys out, and villainous characters trying to shoot at the Mandalorian and so forth. I thought that the use of the perspective cameras was very effective, how we get to see what the droids were seeing and stuff like that, whether they were moving on the floor or in sky view or anything like that. So I thought that aspect of the filmmaking I thought was also very impressive. But for my negatives of the film, unfortunately, this film really can't escape the idea that this probably was going to be a season 4 at one point, depending on what they were going to do with the footage and the cutting room floor. This did kind of just feel like season 4 of the show, but cut down into a feature length film instead. And you really kind of feel that as you're watching the film. It's cool. Yeah, they clearly put a lot of money into this. But at the end of the day, if they really wanted to, if they weren't concerned about the money, yeah, they probably could have just dropped this as a season 4 on Disney Plus at some point. But, here we are. They made it as a film instead. Clearly, that probably meant they could put more money into the effects and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you can just kind of feel that they had to make a decision on the cutting room floor. It was either a season 4 of the show or make it as a film. And here we are. It's a film. Another negative I had with this is because it is so clearly a continuation of that Mandalorian show, it does feel a little too episodic. It does feel like there's times where it's about Mandalorian and the Hutt, and there's times where it's just strictly about Grogu taking care of the Mandalorian and him kind of putting in his part to take care of both of them. There's times where the Mandalorian and these small little monkey creatures and Grogu have to figure out how to get rid of a tough situation involving an assassin. And there's just so many times in the movie where it just feels a little too episodic for its own good. It doesn't feel like one overall continuous story that we're witnessing. It does kind of feel like, okay, that probably could have been one episode. That probably was the second episode. This probably was the third. That probably was the fourth. It just felt a little too episodic to me. And once again, that just goes back to they had to make a decision whether this was going to be a film or another season of the show. And that's kind of where the parts of the show are kind of coming through a little bit. It just feels a little too episodic. Another negative I'll have here is Star Wars doesn't really feel like it's back yet necessarily. Like it doesn't feel like it's back. Hopefully Star Wars Starfighter will correct that when Sean Levy releases that next year in 2027, hopefully. I feel, though I enjoyed this movie, it doesn't quite feel like Star Wars is back on track to where it needs to be quite yet. So hopefully Starfighter will persuade my overall feelings on that. But as of right now, we're not really back with Star Wars yet. I also thought, too, this was overall a waste of Sigourney Weaver. Yeah, it's cool to see her pop up in, once again, another really cool science fiction franchise that seems to be your thing, whether it's Alien or Galaxy Quest or, all these other science fiction things that she seems to show up in. Yeah, it's cool that they got her to be in the movie, but I thought her character was just kind of a waste here. It just kind of felt like anybody with talent really could have just played her character, honestly. And the film, too, does feel a little long-winded. Because it does feel like so many episodes of the show put together, it does have a very long-winded quality. It's like, okay, when is this going to wrap up? When are we going to stop the whole, let's start this and then end this, and then let's start this segment and then end that segment. It does have a very long-winded quality of trying to go outside the whole plot of, helping the Hutts out, tracking down their relative, to all these other stuff that they have to run into. And like I said, it does have a very long-winded quality as a result. And overall, too, I just thought if they really were going to go a movie direction with this, I really thought more cinematic qualities could have helped this film. With the original trilogy of Star Wars, even with the prequels that we had, they were very cinematic stories. It felt like all those Star Wars stories you had to see on the biggest screen possible to enjoy it as much as possible. And there's really nothing about this story in particular that feels like it belongs on a cinema screen the same way that those stories did. But overall, guys, I'm going to give Mando and Grogu an 8 out of 10. I think it's a good movie. I think it's our first, relatively decent Star Wars thing we've gotten in a while as far as films and TV shows go. Like I said, we're not quite completely back yet. I think Star Wars Starfighter really has to knock it out of the park for at least for me to feel that way. Hopefully, other Star Wars fans are going to feel the same too. Um, like I said, a couple negatives along the way. This really could have just been a season 4 of the show if they really wanted to just put this thing out there. But overall, I enjoyed the film. It's not a masterpiece or anything like that, but I enjoyed it for what it was. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. If you're kind of feeling the itch to get something decent with Star Wars, I think there's much worse you can do. It's an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed it enough. See it with caution if you choose to see it.